Hello, good day, class. So for the past week, we have been discussing about the various laws governing the practice of architecture in the Philippines. Uh, I think we're focusing on PD 1096, but PD 1096 is not the only law which is affecting the building industry and architecture profession. There are a lot of laws. But studying PD 96 alone class will take more than one semester. Will take one semester itself. Now to squeeze all the laws into professional practice one, uh, it would be quite physically impossible for you to remember all of them. So that's why I want to give you right now a bird's eye view on the different laws which affects the practice of architecture in the building industry in the Philippines. So when you say first, let's stay at what the architecture laws. The first is RA 545, which is Architecture Law of 1950, was turned into the RA 1581, then which is the Architecture Law of 1956, which was updated by the recent Republic Act 9266, which is I think most of you are familiar with. 9266 is the Architecture Act of 2004. So it generally gave a delineation and definition of the practice of architecture and what's the difference between civil engineering and architecture in practice. So that's what RK 9266 is all about. Although its implementation class, there are still some problems uh, with it, but it's something that we hope that the legislative branch of the government will solve one day. Then I think the leadership of the United Architects of the Philippines are working out on this one. Then you have the regulatory and enforcement laws. We have here the Philippine Arbitration Law in 1953, RA 7160, which is the Local Government Code of the Philippines. The Executive Order 546 is creating a Ministry of Public Works and a Ministry of Transportation and Communications in 1979. RA 3846, which is the Civil Code of the Philippines in 1949. So the Civil Code of the Philippines is uh, is where you can find how long your liability for the project is. So it's important to note, class, that uh, you have a very long civil and professional liability. It's I think 10 from 10 to 25 years if I'm not mistaken. Okay, not worry, we're going to discuss on this one as we move along through the subject. Then you have LOI of 1000, then PD 223, which is the creation of the Professional Regulation Commission, or the PRC, 1973. And then the Professional PRC Communication Regulation Act of 2000, which is RA 8981. Okay, then you have the Design and Construction Reference Laws. Okay, move. There's a problem with my mouse. So I'll just use okay, this one. Okay. So design and construction of laws, you have RA 6541. This is an act to ordain and institute a national building code of the Philippines. Then you have PD 1096, which was after RA 6541 is adopting a national code building of the Philippines, thereby revising RA 6541. Okay, so I think this is you're already very familiar with it as you have done your assignments and your tables on your research. Aside from that, you also have BP 344, which is enhancing the mobility of disabled persons, which is commonly known as the what you call this disability law. Okay, then you have RA 9263, which is Bureau of Fire Protection and Bureau of Jail Management and Penology Professionalization Act. Then PD 1185, which is the Fire Code of the Philippines in 1977. And then the latest is Republic Act 9514, which is an act establishing a comprehensive fire code of the Philippines, repealing Presidential Decree 1185 and other purposes, the revised fire code of the Philippines of 2008. So these are the laws affecting the practice of architecture in the Philippines in relation to safety and protection. As you can see, class, in safety, the laws PD 1096 and RA 9514, they work side by side, although they have some minor differences in the minimum standards. Okay. Then you also have laws for housing and funding. Okay. You have RA 7835, the Comprehensive and Integrated Shelter Finance Act. RA 7279, the Urban Development and Housing Act. RA 3469 is allowing the construction of multi-story tenement housing for the poor and the homeless. Executive Order 90, creating the Housing Urban Development Warning Council. Executive Order 538, describing the administration of the Home Development Mutual Fund, which is your Pag-ibig Fund. Then you have RA 8763, Home Guarantee Corporation Act. BP 220, Standards for Economic and Socialized Housing Projects. This is very important class as architects because BP 220, when most of our clients we encounter especially when you design subdivisions, you're going to do it for something for the economic and socialized housing. Also, you have the RA 4726, the Condominium Act, then RA 6552, the Real Estate Buyers Protective Act. I think most commonly known as I think this is the Maceda Law. Then RA PD 10957, the Condominium and Subdivision Buyers Protective Decree. So these are the different laws which affect housing and funding. Okay, so let's go to the water and plumbing. So PD 1067, that's your water code of the Philippines. RA 9286, the latest amendment to PD 98, the Provincial Water Utilities Act. RA 6234, creating a metropolitan waterworks and sewage system. Then RA 1376, the National Plumbing Code of the Philippines. Okay, so it's not necessary class that you have to memorize everything, but I want you to familiarize yourself with the Republic Acts and the names it corresponds because I think this will come up in your board exam. For example, and one of the questions might be, what is RA 1378? So among the choices, this is going to be jumbled because a computer will decide on the different multiple choices. But you have to know that RA 1378 is the National Plumbing Code of the Philippines. Okay? So you have also laws on environmental protection. You have PD 772, penalizing squatting and other similar acts. PD 984, the Pollution Control Decree. PD 1152, the Philippine Environmental Code. PD 1586, establishing the Environmental Impact Statement System. RA 3931, the National Water and Air Pollution Control Commission. Then RA 90003, Ecological Waste Management Program Law. Then you have also for affecting government service and ethic laws. You have Executive Order 525, which is the responsibility of the Public State Authority on reclamation projects. RA 6713, the Code of Ethical Conduct of a Public Official and Employees. RA 8439, the Magna Carta for Scientists. RA 8974, Law on Acquisition of Right-of-Way, Site, or Location for National Government Infrastructure Projects. And you have RA 3019, Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. PD 49, Decree on Intellectual Property. RA 8993, the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines. Okay, so I think this covers most of the laws. Then some of the tables here, there's are important things that you must remember. Okay, we will discuss UP document 301 and I think in the next professional practice. After your midterms class, we're going to focus our lessons on RE 9266, which is the Architecture Act of 2004. But before midterm, we'll try to study first here now. I think we're already we're very familiar now with the National Building Code of the Philippines. Okay, then next we're going to study about PD 957. Then next we're going to study the fire code. And I hope we can study all these laws, but these are too many laws to be studied in one semester only. So if only the curriculum could be revised to have different subjects for the different laws, so that you can be very familiar with them. But right now, what's important is that you have at least to have a general outlook class on what are the different laws, okay, which affect the practice of architecture. Okay, so next week class, I think we're going to have our first exam in USTEP. So kindly prepare for a 50 to 100 item quiz on PD 1096 or the National Building Code of the Philippines. So it's going to be multiple choice. Then I think since due to the limitations of technology, it's going to be open book. So excuse me. So if you have uh, a very detailed table, I think it will be very useful for the exam. Okay, but the exam class will be 100 items. Then it will take 1.5 hours for you to complete. Okay, then 70 items, multiple choice. 30 items would be identification. So be very careful with identification class because in USTEP, once you write something, it must be the exact. For example, if we are talking about what is the minimum height for rooms with natural ventilations, the answer is around 2.7 meters, right? You have to write 2.70 meters, space meters. So you have to complete. When you say meters, you don't write M, you write meters, meters. Okay? So I hope you're all doing fine. So we won't have an activity this week to give you way for you to study and review for the upcoming quiz next week. Okay, so for this week class, I just need you to comment your name and section below. Then your reflection, excuse me, your reflection on the different laws which affect the practice of architecture in the Philippines or the building industry. Do we have enough laws already, or do you think that we need to craft more detailed laws class to protect our practice and then to protect the public interest as well? Okay, so thank you and see you next meeting next week during your exam in USTEP. So good luck, guys. So uh, keep safe. Thank you.